Hello and welcome to the Daily Atheist. Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful Monday, a weekend. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and safe. Hope everybody stayed safe, stayed cootie free. That's important. We're having, we're getting our ducks in a row here in the background. Little technical difficulties with my guest hosts and their stuff. So it doesn't really matter because I had some words. I got words to speak this morning. So I just want to take a moment to say, hey, good morning, Derek Cruz. Well, let me say hi to everybody in the chat. Normally I do that a little later in it. Let me say hi. Good morning, John. Giggling, sower ginger. Giggling sewer ginger. I ain't never seen that one before. That's okay. Good morning. Giggling sewer ginger. Junk Shop Library, Inquisitive Quandary. Hi, IQ. Good morning. How are you doing? Nice to have so many people here this morning already. And Neil. Hey, Neil, have you talked to Cynthia yet? I need to get you together with Cynthia. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about her thing this morning, her deconversion story, possibly. I just didn't want to... I wanted to make sure you get with her. Real quick, I want to say thank you very much to my patrons. I have got a new $20 per month patron, the gold level, and that would be Ian Davenport. So I've got Ian Davenport. I've got two gold level patrons now, and that's wonderful. That's like a big validation that what I'm doing is right. So it's wonderful. I appreciate everybody so much. And I'm working to add up credits at the end of the show. This is going to be the first show. I'm going to have end credits, and, have my photographs of my, my support crew here, my staff. If you're familiar with my staff, you may have heard them barking. Anyway, good morning, everybody. I hope you had a great weekend. Oh, hey, here's Miss Cynthia. Let me pull up Cynthia. Cynthia, I just created you a new name. Let me get you on here. Hold on. You're not here yet. Nope, that's not you. There you are. Okay, Daniel's having technical difficulties. He's trying though. Good morning, Cynthia. You're back. Look here.
Good morning, Chris. How are you?
I am wonderful. Did you have a good weekend?
No, not too shabby. It wasn't too bad. Did another big grocery trip in a whole different state. I think that's almost a new normal right now. So, other than that, not too shabby at all. What about you?
I had a pretty good weekend. We had a wonderful sci-fi Saturday. It was an extra long one. And then, because, I don't know if you knew, but we went an hour before you showed up.
Yeah, I remember you were telling me that you were still going before I even popped on to the live stream. So
yeah. So it was a long day, but I got to show off my new batleth. For those of you who don't know, I got a batleth. The wife gifted me a batleth because she's wonderful. A real live batleth. I mean, real. It's like, I was like complying all weekend. It was wonderful. Daniel, can you hear us now, buddy?
I can. I had to restart my phone. I was having some audio issues. I don't know what was going on.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, glad you made it and that you got your stuff worked out. Everybody, this is Daniel Fisk Bennet. He's really big into the anti-pseudoscience side of Facebook. He's got a lot of groups that he manages over there, and he's also assistant state director of American Atheist for Washington State. Am I wrong or am I wrong?
No, you're correct. And I also do a lot of stuff with political activism and social justice. So I am honored to be able to speak with Cynthia here. I mean, like, holy cow, icon, rock star.
I know, that's wonderful, huh? And then, of course, we've got Miss Cynthia with us. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to let you introduce yourself because, I normally try to give people introductions. This is Cynthia. She's a black activist, and she does this, and she does that, and she blesses over it, prays over it, Jedi mind trick, and she's got all this stuff. But I'm not going to do you the justice because you got a lot going on. So would you tell our people about what you've got going on? For those who don't know, she was on our show Saturday because she is an uber sci-fi nerd, Star Trek all the way.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to get her back for some Doctor Who. If we can. I'm going to have to beg and pray, right?
Yes.
So if you don't mind, can you give us an introduction of yourself, please?
Sure. And just on that Doctor Who note, there's not a lot of begging and praying you got to do. Trust. Okay.
I'm marking you down.
All right. Very good. So my name is Cynthia McDonald. I am from Chicago, Illinois. I currently am a social worker in the city of Chicago. I work with adults, helping them get access to different resources like housing, medication, and just like connecting them to other support that they might need, like, mental health, just a whole gambit, all the different social determinants of health. I help them kind of access food, all that great stuff. I'm also a YouTuber as well. I'm one half of a host of a show called The 13%, which is a show that talks about socio-political issues in the Black community, specifically the ones of people that descend from chattel slavery, which is the majority of Black Americans in the United States. And also I am a general secretary of a political advocacy group here in Chicago called ADOS Chicago. ADOS stands for American Descendants of Slavery. And we specifically advocate for policies to help the betterment of our communities. And we do that in the political atmosphere. And I am and also, as Chris mentioned, I am an uber nerd. I love Star Trek. I love all things science fiction. And as I said on Saturday, it's all my mother's fault. And I'm also a singer and songwriter. I've even taught music for a while. And I have currently put out singles, usually like in more like dance music, like what we call it house music. So I've done that, and I still kind of dabble in that a bit, but I'm kind of more like on the political side of life right now, just because of all the advocacy, the work that I do. And since this is the Daily Atheist, I am an atheist, and I have been an atheist for approximately 2 years now. I was, and I kind of entered into it by practicing Buddhism, which I told you about that too. So yeah, so that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. So now for everybody who's watching, now you see why I didn't even try. She's just got so much going on. It's just better to hand it to her and let her go. You know what I mean? And there's another important factor that I believe we forgot to mention, and that's that you're a cat owner. Is that right?
Yes, I do have.
You're owned by a cat?
I'd rather say that. I refer to the cat as the cat that lives with me.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yes, because there is no owning. There is no owning of cats in this house.
Yeah, I know, right? You've seen those memes about them being gods, right?
Yeah, and I know that you were talking about that the other show that I still have yet to check out, where like the cats were like in charge, And to be honest, I think that show is a spinoff from Doctor Who, if I'm not mistaken.
That may be. I've heard a little bit more about it, that there may not be cats in charge. I think there's one cat. I don't know. I got to go watch it. But it's on my list. You know how it is. You're so busy. We got so much going on. But now it's like, whenever I'm free, the wife, I don't know. I'm going to have to watch a few episodes before I can see if I can get her involved. But 12 seasons. 12 seasons says there was something good going on there.
That is correct. And I'm going to ask for 1 minute because I can smell my coffee. So if I can grab it real quick,
that's quite all right. I got it. Me and go ahead.
All right, thank you.
So good morning, Daniel. How did your weekend go?
Oh my goodness, it was rather chaotic. I had both boys here and running around and acting the fool.
Absolutely.
Taking fishing and.
Let me ask you. I'm sorry.
We took the youngest. I took both kids out to a fish farm, and the youngest, he didn't quite grasp that he couldn't go near the water because at the fish farm it's not like a normal lake area. It's dug straight down, so it's like you have the grassy area that leads to a 10-foot sheer water drop. I mean, it's like the water is level, but if you step up, you plunge into the water like a pool, and kept having to grab the 5-year-old.
Goodness. Let me ask you real quick. What you're in Washington, or you're in Washington proper, right?
Yes.
So, what's going on there in your city concerning these marches and stuff? Which city are you in? Are you in Seattle?
No, I'm in what's called Lakewood. It's like a suburb of Tacoma, which is the other major city here in the Washington State area, which is not far from Seattle. And I've been at least to one of the BLM marches, And by and large, they have been very peaceful. We did have an issue last night where some idiot decided to drive into one of the protests, and unfortunately got out and shot somebody. So I mean,
No way.
you're gonna have jerks wherever you are. I mean, I remember when I was at the protest, we had someone try bulldozing through us. Thankfully, no one got hurt in that case.
Right.
It seems to be something that these radicalized racist, I would say, individuals seem to think that it's okay for them to go charging through a group of people. I mean, I see them talking about it.
Right. Okay. Man, you just gleaned on something really important and ran away. So somebody drove into a crowd last night and then started shooting. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, the 27-year-old male was hit. Yeah, it was in Seattle Times. It was last night in I think in Capitol Hill in downtown Seattle. Yeah, some moron decided that they just gonna drive through a crowd of people, and then he got out and shot somebody with a long rifle. And it's if it were any other person, they'd call it terrorism. I mean, of
course.
Yeah,
especially if he is just a Muslim by chance, not even related to it, just happened to be a Muslim. Yeah.
It's mind-boggling that these things happen, and it's just like, oh no, it's a hate crime. It's like, no, it's terrorism.
Yeah. Well, it can be both.
It is a hate crime, but it is also terrorism.
Yeah, it can be both. It's one of those dynamic things that can wear both hats. You made it back, Cynthia.
I did.
Coffee and 80s. See, coffee is very important, especially with a morning show.
Yes.
Real quick, I gotta say, I want to thank. Hold on a second. It's Trina DeLuca. Thank you, Trina DeLuca, for the $5 before the show. I appreciate it. She showed us some support. Bought a coffee for the show. So you know how it is. I almost forgot to say thank you. I appreciate it very much. So as you were hearing, Daniel Fisk Bennet was telling me about last night in Seattle. So unfortunate. These kind of things. I got into an argument with someone close to me a long time ago because he said that he was mad because we had protesters in the street. And at the time they were protesting, I believe it was college and school. I'm sorry, I got weed brain, right? There was high school children marching out of their schools by the thousands in colleges and stuff, just a few years ago. I don't know if y'all remember that. Whenever this was going on, and they were marching in the streets and blocking traffic and stuff, this person close to me said things like, if it was me, I'd just run them right over. And I was like, you can't possibly really believe that. And, whenever you look at what's going on, what were they marching for? They were marching for education and rights and equality and freedom and stuff like that. Whenever you get the other side marching, it's because it's for shit reasons, it's because they want to get their haircut. And one side is marching, holding peace signs, and these people matter. We all matter kind of things. The other side tends to hold hate signs related to this and carry weapons. Heavily armed weapon. And then they complain about the marchers on the left. You know what I mean? We're probably, if you had brown people show up at a city hall en masse, brown/black people of color, you know what I mean? En masse at a city hall carrying heavy weapons, it would be an entirely different thing than what we see.
Well,
generally.
Actually, that happened in California back in, I think it was the 70s or whatever it was.
Right.
And then Reagan, when he was the governor there, decided he was going to go work with the NRA, amazingly, and got open carry banned in California.
Yeah.
Brown people start doing it. Apparently now white people get scared and do things, but white people do it. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
that's kind of like the way of this country.
Yeah, from the beginning. Actually, for those who don't know,
systematic oppression.
Yeah, we had slaves in the United States before the United States was the United States.
That is correct.
And I was actually I did a little bit of background scene work on some movies here in New Mexico, and I rode around doing. Actually, the show was called The Messiah. A TV series on Netflix. So we were doing some running around in the back hills of New Mexico here to look like we were going through Oregon or something. And the person who was riding with me was black. And we were talking about various things and going on. And whenever I mentioned that many of the people who actually played part of the enslavement of the black people were black people from other tribes and stuff like that. It was a really complicated deal. She absolutely could not accept that at all. It was a very hard. No, it was just no, pull over. We can't talk about this no more. But there was a lot of that went on. One tribe would make an agreement with these white men or Dutch people or whomever, and they would take over these other people and sell them to the, that was very common back in the day. There's a lot of sin to be worn, a lot of hats of ugly to be worn during that time. But we just
remember seeing something about that. And then also on top of that, then once those tribe members, those warring tribes, ran out of people to sell, then they would wind up turning on themselves, and then then the white people would come along and just like, all of y'all coming with.
Yeah. And, of course it was.
That happened in Africa too. Yeah. Like, I can think of, I forgot the woman's name. She was a queen I want to say in Angola. And she would sell others into slavery. She would trade them into slavery, and then what ended up happening is that she did it to try to get her, so her people will be okay.
Yeah.
But then after what ended up happening is that the people who she struck a deal with ended up turning on her, and then she and her tribe ended up becoming slaves. So.
Right. Yeah. That whole cycle. Absolutely. Real quick, I want to ask you, I got to say to my people, and to Daniel, especially to my other co-hosts, I screwed up my descriptions. I forgot to do the things. I didn't get my co-hosts' descriptions in the chat below. So I'll fix that after the show. I'm just covering a couple of notes. And then real quick, I want to go back to you, Miss Cynthia, and ask you about that 13% show you run.
Yeah. Can
you tell me how it got its name and explain that? And
Sure.
How long you been doing it? It's a new show, right?
Yeah, it's a fairly new show. So you're familiar with Ethan Michael. Shout out to Ethan from your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go through all the little inceptions of how we even got to here, right?
Okay, go ahead. We got time. It's all you. I'm gonna put you on a big screen.
Okay. Ta-da. So I was actually on my way to work, social working, right? And I was listening to the podcast Talk Heathen. And as I was listening to it, I heard Ethan come on, who was saying that he was starting this new debate channel I'll call Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. And he was also saying that he was out of the Chicagoland area. And so, and he was sounding really excited. I was like, okay, I'm about to check that out, right? So I ended up going on Facebook and actually listening to an episode where he was debating a Christian. And I started to chime in like, no, that's a fallacy because of blah, blah, blah. No, that's incorrect because of blah, blah, blah. I was commenting on a lot of the different things that the theist was saying. And then Ethan saw my comments and then he said, oh, holy cow, I saw your comments and I knew I had to friend you, right? So we were talking back and forth and he was asking me if I knew about this particular podcaster named Steven Crowder. And I was like, no, I'm unfamiliar with him. And basically, Steven Crowder is a you're familiar with her?
I am, yeah. If you want to describe him, go ahead for those of us. I need to get him on my show.
Oh, that would be an interesting show. So Steven Crowder he has his own podcast and video, and he's on YouTube as well. And he goes to college campuses where he speaks to students and people that's on the campus about hot button issues. And he takes a more conservative right-wing position when it comes to a lot of the different inceptions of what that he wants to talk about.
Does he?
Yeah, he takes more of like a right wing.
His whole deal is that the liberal redneck is his whole shtick. Trey Crowder. Are we talking?
Steven Crowder.
I'm sorry. I was talking about somebody else. Trey Crowder. I am sorry, brother. He's the one I'd like to get on the show. I have no idea who you're talking about, Karen.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Gotcha. I'll show you Steve. Yeah, Trey is hilarious. He's a liberal redneck.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, I would love that. Would be a great conversation.
He actually started out like a YouTuber like me, just kind of ranting about conservatism, but as a redneck, you know. And then he kind of got all big, I guess, and moved over to California, and then he got kind of chunky. I'm like, you know, Trey, you need to ease up on that success, buddy. Slide back a little bit. No, carry on. Anyway, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was thinking about the Beverly Hillbillies, you know, like, and we're going to California. Where are we going to be?
I need to get a graphic with him on their truck driving to Beverly Hills. That's a wonderful thing.
With a cement pond and everything. That would be great. Anyway.
Steven Crowder. I'm sorry, Steven Crowder.
Steven Crowder, yes. So he sent me a video of Steven Crowder and where he was taking a negative stance on affirmative action. And he called affirmative action racist. So I was listening to the actual video because like we were going to actually do like Ethan and I were going to do a reaction video together where we were kind of like commenting on some of the things that he was saying. And then but we ended up doing a different video on the fly where we were talking about his stance on Steven Crowder was first talking about male privilege, and then it turned into white male privilege, and basically how white male privilege had been viewed throughout history, and like some of the animus that's against that, and is it warranted, and you know, a whole different thing with that. So we did that particular video. Then COVID happened, and some of the data was coming out about how COVID-19 infection was disproportionately affecting Black communities. And when I saw the data, I wasn't shocked. And because you have to look at a lot of different issues, especially the social determinants of health, and also healthcare disparities that, you know, disproportionately affect Black communities. And it has been like that historically. So if in all the comorbidities that one can possess, that it would exacerbate a COVID-19 infection is very prevalent in the Black community, like hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, asthma, you know, all these particular issues. So we did a show about that together, myself, and then he brought on another young man named Richard Graves, who is a theologian. He's a historian. He works in law enforcement and also a doctoral candidate. He's a very smart guy. And so we got on camera. We were having this discussion on, you know, why this is, you know, why we're not surprised about this. And, you know, we really talked about, like, you know, all the different, you know, adverse issues that disproportionately affect Black communities that would actually lead in, so that we would lead in this infection space, and also mortality space, right? So, and then I guess like the show, a lot of people was like, yeah, that you guys, you know, really vibe very well off of each other. And because like there's so many different things to talk about as far as like, you know, socially in our communities, lack of policies, systemic racism, all these different things, and how it is still affecting our communities to this day. Yeah.
Do you, now I've noticed, I remember when we did a sociological thing, we were looking at a lot of those issues that disproportionately affect you know, Black and brown communities. A lot of those areas looked like those were also the same areas that back in the 50s were redlined. Is that still hold true, that that redlining that happened is still part of that problem today?
Oh yes, redlining never really went away. I know that, like, you know, so of course we had like this legislation 1964, 1965, and 1968. 1968 was supposed to do away with redlining because that was the Fair Housing Act, right? Now you did get access to home loans, so more Black people were able to actually purchase houses. Matter of fact, my parents couldn't get a loan before 1968, and they both worked. And matter of fact, my father was a veteran, and he was trying to use his GI Bill so that he can purchase a house, and they wouldn't let him get it, and they never told him why. They just said, no, you just can't get it. He's like, wait, what? I kind of fought in Korea. It's like, yeah, no more about that. So,
Wow.
and it's kind of crazy. And so once they were able, they purchased a house in 1969. But what happened was that the area that they purchased the house on, it was predominantly Jewish. And then in less than 3 years, it became Black. And you know, and a lot of it was because, of course, more and more people were actually purchasing homes. They were actually being able to get credit, things of that nature. But what ended up happening was that you would see an erosion of resources that were in those communities go away. So you saw less investments in the schools. You saw less investments in making sure that the park districts were cleaned and safe. You saw less investments of even things like making sure that there are clinics there, they're making sure that there are grocery stores there. You saw a higher prevalence of food deserts. And also too, even in the area that I lived in, like one of the biggest employers was the steel mill. And where, you know, a large amount of Black Americans was working there, a lot of Black men was working there, making really good salaries. So they were able to, you know, keep up with their homes and things of that nature. But then it closed, and there was no real alternative for a lot of those particular men who were working in the steel mill to go. You know, so you saw like a huge dip in like income in that particular area as well. Okay, I lost my train of thought. Hold on, let me get a sip of coffee. Okay, very good. So anyway, what ended up happening is that so when even banks and insurance companies will actually look in that particular area to see where they would invest. They drew those particular lines around there, and they didn't invest in those areas. They didn't, and you saw like less proper development in those particular areas as well. So it's a direct correlation from a redline area to even all the different, you know, issues that you would see, you know, that's disproportionately affecting our communities.
So essentially, you've gone from the legal Jim Crow style of redlining to just business redlining in the private sector. It's
Right.
still happening, but is more subvert instead of overt.
Correct. You are absolutely correct. Matter of fact, I was reading an article about redlining about a couple of days ago, and one of the things that I found quite interesting is that there was so insurance companies was able to actually pull racial data they're still able to pull racial data in certain areas so that they would determine if they would insure a certain housing, cars, things of that nature, like any type of like, you know, insurance that you would buy for, right? They can pull racial data to see if they would actually insure those particular entities or properties or not.
So
and there's
curious, is there also like a disproportionate, if you look at, you know, a minority African American, what have you, versus white male, comparatively, you look at the two side by side, is one paying more than the other?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because like if you think about it, if when it comes to like insurance or even getting the loans, like, okay, so since banks are not loaning at the rate that they would loan in a predominantly white area, so oftentimes like if like most like Black people who are in a certain community are going to look for like, you know, influx of credit or capital or anything like that, they will have to go through alternative sources. A good way to put it is like a payday loan store. If you go into like a predominantly Black area, you're going to see a whole lot of them. You're going to see a lot of currency exchanges. You're going to see a lot of payday loan stores. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the last time I checked the rates for like a payday loan store versus like a bank, it's huge. It's almost like 100%. Like 98 to 90, like interest rate. The thing is like they make you pay it back quickly, right?
Yes.
And you know, so But it's not like a secure loan, like a FHA loan, or like, you know, like a house, like an additional loan that you can get from your bank, you know, if you want to do like work on your house so that you can actually increase the equity in it. It's not like that. And so like you see where you know, a Black person goes to a payday loan store so that they can get extra cash so that they can do something like fix their car. And they're paying way more on a smaller loan that may be like $500, $600 versus like a white person who's able to get like a loan for like $10,000 to $15,000 and paying a way less rate, and can use and also can pay it back over a longer period of time. And they're actually going to end up getting the win, because that's going to increase the equity in their home. And then if they go to sell it, they're going to end up getting more money from it, and then also use that particular money to like ingratiate them and also cause them to have more wealth.
Yeah, and there was something I remember in one of my sociology classes, I think it was my social psychology class, we were looking at the predominance of food deserts and health deserts and community investment along areas that are Black and brown communities, and and we were able to see like direct correlation between investment disparities. Here, you'll see like an area where like this area is predominantly white and this area is predominantly brown, how much or Black, and how much money the state allocates towards those communities, and you can see that they're disproportionate in the way, and it's in some cases, especially in the South, they were pretty egregious. You'd look at that and like, how are they legally getting away with that?
Well, I would. When I was even looking at this whole thing concerning George Floyd and all the different folk who have lost their lives to police and also to vigilantes. Yeah. And one of the things what we
call modern day lynching.
Yes. Yeah. You know, even though like some people will be like, oh, how dare you say lynching? I said, no, it was a lynching. Oh, it was. It's lynching. But you know, why you see like a bunch of people like in the streets that's screaming, right? It's because you see the lack of accountability that happens in as far as like, you know, people who commit these particular acts on certain communities. Like I think of Dylan Roof when he shot up that church in South Carolina, and he killed 9 people, and yet he was given a Kevlar vest and taken to Burger King.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, and so going back to the whole thing about, you know, how can you do this legally? It's either you ignore the legalese, like the 14th Amendment, or you create other policies that even like some people like in my community may not necessarily be completely privy to, that says, oh, well, we can, even though like we said this, but we can do this, you know, so that because if you don't meet these particular qualifications, even though we created the environment for you not to meet these qualifications, right, we're not going to give it to you. And that's kind of like what you see today. I remember I was tagged into this post where this woman, and I'm hoping that we can actually come up with a date where we can actually have a discussion about how she said that systemic racism doesn't exist anymore. And
I would invite her to take a sociology class.
yeah. And it was kind of funny because she mentioned that some people like sent her like, you know, different data and articles and stuff like that. And, you know, and then she's like, well, if you have more to kind of change my position. And one of the things I said, well, you know what, I'd rather have a conversation with you, because for some reason, I'm feeling that when you are reading what you're reading, you are not connecting the dots to see how systemic racism is very much so alive today.
Is this a person who comes from a background of privilege?
I would say so, yes. Yeah. According to their profile picture.
I would probably say if it wasn't for the fact that I grew up in Los Angeles, I'd probably have the same rose-colored glasses. I mean, I'm your poster boy for privilege. I grew up in in a educated white collar family in the hills of LA. But if my parents were at least liberal and thought it important that I go to a public school, for the most part. I still went to some private schools, but it kept me grounded. And I learned that, hey, they're the same people. Everyone's the same. Just some people got screwed over, or some people didn't have this, or this. Why does this area look different than that area? This doesn't make sense.
Right.
I have a question for Cynthia, and that's from Junk Shop Library. Wants to know, what's the mental health care situation like for communities up north? He says it's abysmal in the South. I'm sure it is there too.
It's dismal.
No, it's horrible. I mean, like, so, okay. So like one of the things that happened in Chicago, I want to say like maybe a few years before Rahm Emanuel became mayor, you saw a bunch of the closing of mental health group homes, and because of lack of funding. And what ended up happening
was during the Reagan era, right? I remember.
No, it was Bush Jr.
Bush, okay.
Yeah, Bush Jr. And what ended up happening was that you saw like a lot of these particular group homes close, and then you instantly saw a huge increase of homelessness, and of course it was disproportionately Black.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because like these mental health facilities, they were no longer there, and also you saw not only the closing of the group homes happened. You saw a huge influx of the homeless population that were disproportionately Black folk. And then you saw another increase of incarceration rates because these people are now on the street. And I remember even when I was working on my community health certification, we were in my mental health class. We were watching a documentary. I want to say that PBS put out a few years ago about, and they were following these Black men who obviously had, mental health issues, and they were actually taking medication. Like I remember, like one person, they said it was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And he would have hallucinations if untreated. And so they gave him about 2 weeks of medication. He was not able to. He wasn't able to actually be connected to a medical facility so that he can continuously get his medication. He only has so much money. So like I think that he left the prison with like less than $100. And no coverage as far as like health insurance was concerned, not even Medicaid. And then what ended up happening was that he had a psychotic episode. He was like in the middle of I think he was at a convenience store. I think he was trying to get something, and then he ended up having a hallucination, wigged out. The owner called the cops, and he ended up right back in jail. So
see,
I mean,
and that's one of the big issues that I remember we were talking about. I don't remember which class. I've taken so many of them now, but we were talking about how people of color were constantly screwed over when it came down to the mental health system. You would see that they would get shoved into prisons disproportionately compared to their white counterparts.
Right.
And that shows the inequality right there when it comes down to mental health care. I mean, granted, mental health care in the United States is its own separate issue. Just in general, we effectively rely on prisons to infirm the people who have psychiatric issues. But when you look at the disparity there of who's in an actual mental health center versus who's in jail, it's disproportionately Black. And of no fault of that African American community of their own. It's just we have failed them through that, as you pointed out, through redlining, systemic racism, just just add the pile. It's just a big pile of just damn.
Yeah, and it's true. I even if you like looking at like the mass incarceration statistics, I read a report. It's called the color of justice. That and it was a report. I want to say that was even published back in 2016. With a bunch of different researchers that actually came together to kind of study the issue that we're dealing with as far as like, this influx of prison and how, and like even when we look at the prison population for Black males is like around 41%, even though they only represent about 6% of the entire population in the United States. So again, like none of these things are apart from one another, like if like people's like, I remember like someone told me that, well, we have to deal with the cultural implications of Black Americans, that specifically descend from, Native Black Americans, chattel slavery, Native Black Americans, and why they would be more prevalent for adverse behaviors that will cause them to go to prison. And I have to push back and said it's not a cultural problem. That this is not a cultural issue. It's not just because Black people just don't want to do shit. No, this you have to look at all the historical implications and also policy, legislation and policy that actually led us to this particular space where a group of people is is prevalent for every disparity that there can be that you can think of versus others, and even like and I understand like why people would utilize the word like people of color, but I kind of push back on that term too, because not every minority group has the same experience. I can even look at data statistics where you have Asian Americans actually, in some cases doing better than white people. As far as like income goes, job, and even like you have like some immigrants that'll come over specifically from different countries and they'll do pretty well. And that's a whole nother thing, why that is.
Right.
But it's usually, but like when it comes to like data points, especially like issues like that affect us, it all goes back to slavery and Jim Crow, all of it. Even if you're looking at like how police are generally in the treatment of African Americans. A lot of the police departments and also even police practices are birthed out of slave patrols. And even like, if you look at also to the forming of the KKK, which I believe was in the end of the 19th century, not too far after Reconstruction, a lot of KKK members became police officers and legislatures. They were right in the midst of either law enforcement or creating law.
Yeah.
And we see what the effects of those are.
Still. Yeah. I have a couple of points real quick, if I can steal the light for a moment. We have somebody watching from the chat, Grumpy Old Dude, Ed Schofield. I hope I said your name right, Ed. Hope I said Ed right. He runs a channel called the Grumpy Old Dude channel, and he used to be a racist and a member of some racist groups, and now he is against those things, and he's turning his powers for good. And he's got this channel, and he actually asked in the chat if you'd be possibly willing to do an interview with him on his show about I would
love to.
Okay, good. Well, I'll hook you guys up with some contact information. So, yeah, he's got a nice little channel he's developing. He just got started. He's new, and of course, I gotta say, hats off to Ed, because he was doing the the anti-racism thing before everybody got on the bandwagon. He was, now we had the George Floyd thing, and now everybody's up in arms. But before that happened, Ed was up in arms about racism. So way to go, Ed. And thank you for that.
Shout out to Ed.
Yes. Shout out to Ed. So what other things do you have going on coming up in the near future?
So we're actually doing an episode on police reform this evening on the 13%. So that will be on YFNA News, YFNA News on YouTube. So you can go ahead and check us out there. We're going to talk about the 8 can wait policy suggestion implication. Will it help or hinder? And, you know, and also to my other co-host, Richard, as I mentioned, is in law enforcement and actually had like other suggestions of his own that we're going to really be talking about and getting into the crux too. So that should be a pretty good show. That's going to be airing live at 7:30 Central Daylight Time. So, you know, depending on where you are, you know, do the conversion. Let's see. Also, I know that we were in the works of like talking about, you know, doing other shows on the atheist side as well on your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. So probably going to be doing like my version of of a friendly conversation with where I'm talking more to diverse people that's in the atheist community. That's like, you know, especially like atheist activists. So, you know, because like, I know that like a lot of times, like when we think of like, you know, like the famous atheists, like, you know, it's mostly white men. Like your Matt Dillahunties, your Richard Dawkins, your, you know,
Absolutely.
your Aaron Ross, you know, Seth Andrews, love Seth, by the way. So I love all of them, but that's who you generally think of, like when you think atheists correlate to that, right? But there's so many diverse voices that are, you know, you got Black folk that's like, you know, like you think of like the Black non-believers. I think about the Secular Sisters with AJ, Ayana. You got, and you even have like, you know, other people who like, you know, transgender folk, LGBTQ folk, you know, that's really like, you know, filling up this space, more women that's filling up this space. And, you know, and I desire to really like, you know, talk to them and give them like, you know, so that we can, you know, talk about like a lot of issues that actually affect us as a community. Right. So yeah, look for that. And also, and I forgot to mention that I write a blog, So I write a blog called ADOS Health and Wellness.com. And it is a blog that explores the social determinants of health for the American descendants of slavery. And, you know, so I have a few articles about identity, about COVID, even like when we had our conversation concerning COVID-19 actually disproportionately affecting our communities. So, and I even, in my latest article was about the recent killing of Black bodies. Like, and I also talked about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many other names that the list is so long. That's a show right there, you know. So
right. Well, you know, I've got words real quick, if you don't mind. I'm posting a link to your blog. I briefly popped it open and check it out. It looks really good. And I want to say thank you to tons of my for $2 of support to the chat. Spliffs all around. Spliffs makes everything more gooder. You know, we had just kind of, for you who don't know, we had a little strife in the chat, you know, and I think we got it squared away and everybody's happy, I think. Anyway, hopefully that's all taken care of. But thank you again, tons of mice, for the support. And also, like I said, this wellness page, let's look at this for a minute before we go away. I like that. That's looks pretty good. Now, how long have you been doing this?
I just started this particular blog early this year, matter of fact.
Wonderful.
I had an idea of actually doing it because I was writing a blog previously called Cam Fitting 40. And it was just basically me just kind of like exploring what it's like to be a 40-year-old woman and all those different things that come up. And that's also like when I started that blog when I started my Buddhist practice. And then, you know, and because I think there was somebody in the chat that said Buddhist atheist, that's weird, you know. Yes. And I was like, no,
that's what started the little little brush fire in our chat was around the atheist, Buddhist, something along those lines. I missed what began the actual start of the disagreement, but that's what it ended up being something about. So
yeah, yes. I think because like a lot of people, matter of fact, it was kind of funny. The other day I was taking this young lady to the grocery store in Indiana because all of our grocery stores that was in our area were shut down because of the rioting. And so I'm trying to condense the story. So like she mentioned that, you know, the God that she serves and the Holy Spirit that she hears would not allow hurt, harm, or danger to befall us if we're going, you know, so far, even though it wasn't that far. Because like in Chicago and where I live versus Indiana, it's like, you know, only a 10-minute drive away. So I mentioned to her, and I stated to her, I said, well, I'm atheist, but okay, you know, and because like that was like me trying to say, you know, chill with the God shit, lady, and we'll have a nice little conversation, you know, keep it light, you know what I'm saying? Because I hate, you know, I don't necessarily mind talking about religion, but I do mind talking about religion because I if I'm going to talk about religion, I'd rather do it in an environment where we both kind of agree on how we're going to approach the subject. You know, if you plan on keeping an open mind, so do I. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if you don't, and if you're not going to be like on the defensive because I'm going to say some things that may not necessarily you agree with, you know, it's not necessarily an attack on you. I like kind of how Eric Murphy said it. He said it's not an attack on you, it's an attack on the idea. You know, and you have to learn how to separate yourself from between yourself and the idea. And so she decided to on our way back from the grocery store to do a whole proselytization from the time that we left to the time that we got back to Chicago. And it was a bunch of me having to correct her on what an atheist is, you know, and you know, one of them, she likened being atheist to Scientology. I was like, oh no, oh gosh, no, you know. And then first she doubled down when I corrected her, and then she kind of like, you know, pivoted like from that, and I just had to say, oh, like, listen, being an atheist. The thing about an atheist is just a lack of belief in gods or a God. That's it. It's not deep. And you got all types of different atheists as far as like, you know, as far as like how they decide to interact with the world. But, you know, but at the end of the day, it's like just based on the lack of evidence to support the existence of a God or gods. You know, more than likely, I go to the lack of belief, and that's it. That's it. Yeah.
I have a real quick thank you, Derek Cruz. He says $2 of chat to the $2 of chat support to the channel. Thank you. And he says Cynthia is great. I have to agree. Cynthia has been awesome. This is again the second time I've had her on the show in just a matter of days, and you've been fantastic. You're just awesome.
Thank you.
Now, first of all, I gotta agree with you. I can't help but agree with you on many things. And one of them is that there's not enough Black representation in the atheist community, especially streamers. Voices on our side going, hey, this is what it is. We've got Dragnut Silvas, but I don't know that he really addresses, I think, and you know, Dragnut, I don't know, watch enough of your stuff if you're watching. I think he spends most of his time really arguing with somebody else about, it's more of a culture thing than it is about atheism on his channel. I think I could be wrong. But we just don't have enough. And I'm sure there's bound to be more. But we need more. And that was one of the things the wife and I were talking about over these past week. What can we do to help in various times? And the only thing I really got, because I'm like half the other country, I'm on unemployment, or actually almost on unemployment, almost off of it. It's complicated. But I do have a platform that I can bring people on and help educate other people, bring people like you on to help educate other people like me. Right. And I think your voice is very much needed in the atheist community. Yeah, and others like it, actually, in fact. Somebody asked real quick about what's your Buddhist background.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's do that.
If you got a moment, yeah.
I do. I got a moment. So, okay. So, how I became Buddhist is that I was a practicing Christian for many years. I grew up Episcopal. And then I got saved in college. And all you ex-evangelical Christians, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the ones who are still in that. And then as I got older and I started to have a spiritual crisis per se, because I started, really questioning a lot of my beliefs and why do I believe this stuff? Is it because, I was indoctrinated? Well, yeah, but, like, yeah, pretty much I was, but, but does it make sense for me to start to keep on believing? Right. And then, so I started to kind of look outside of Christianity to kind of find out, the answers of life. So, I got into yoga. I was studying chakras and had some essential oils. I still got crystals. They're pretty because I like them. They're pretty, catch the light really nicely. And then I had a coworker at the time that introduced me to Buddhism, specifically Nietzschean Buddhism. I don't know if any of you all ever seen the movie, the Tina Turner movie, What's Love Got to Do with It?
If I have, it's been a long time.
It came a long time. It came out, I want to say, in '94. So that's a minute.
Many moons.
Yeah. But
I'm starting to realize how much younger I am compared to everyone now.
I know. I just kind of showed my age, but it's all good. Anyway, but
part of that generation where computers were always there, and so was the internet.
I see. Yeah, and they call my generation what do they call us? They call us Zennials. So like we're the last of the Generation X and the beginning of the Millennials. So like we went from analog to digital. So, yeah.
I'm Gen X. I look like a one of those other ones, the
Boomer.
But I am not. It's just the gray. Okay. Yes.
Nothing wrong with that. Look, if I took this off, you would see my gray hair too. Quit playing. So, so my coworker at the time, he introduced me to Buddhism. The Nietzschean Buddhism, that's the Buddhism that practices chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And Nam Myoho Renge Kyo means dedicate oneself to the mystic law of cause and effect through sound. That's basically what it means. And the thing about this particular practice is that, we talk about a lot of, being your best self and really like building up, like, cause like we call this whole thing about everyone possessing a Buddha nature, and that just means that everyone possesses everything that you need in order for you to be your best self. That's basically what Buddha nature is, and Buddha itself just means awakened one. So anyway, as I started, he would, kind of tell me about it. And then I had so many different questions. And then, he was like, you know what, you just need to go to an intro meeting because you asking me all these questions and I don't, and I was like, all right, cool. So I went and it was nice. And then I got a chance to read like a few books. And one of the things that, and I can understand how, like, some people who are not familiar with, especially with this particular school of Buddhism or thought of Buddhism, is that this particular thought of Buddhism, there is no worship of gods. Like there is no central deity or deities that one will prop up in order for you to receive blessing and favor. Matter of fact, like it says, and especially like in a lot of the intro literature about really giving the differences between like an Abrahamic religion versus like, you know, practicing this particular Buddhism. So I remember like once I said, you know, I kind of like this because like and I really like the chanting. And because like it's very much so like a meditative practice. It's nothing magical or magical or woo-woo about it. As far as like chanting is concerned, it's kind of like, you know how like I guess like a lot of psychologists would talk about how meditation can be very good for the mind. And one of the things that I definitely get from chanting is a focus of my mind. So it kind of helps clear the cobwebs, put way. You know what I'm saying?
So you embrace the chill without the woo.
Exactly.
I get it.
Exactly.
I get it. Okay, that's cool. I dig that. Yeah.
Yeah, and also too, like for the as far as like, you know, like if a person says, well, how can you be atheist and be and still be Buddhist? I would definitely say that Buddhism led me to be an atheist, and one of the reasons why is because the current, like, you know, one they call President Daisaku Ikeda in Japan, he wrote a series of books called The Human Revolution. And he put in the very first volume of the book, above all, Buddhism is good reason. And when you really start to contemplate on those words, you can look at how you can use these particular practices to kind of reason yourself out of things that don't make sense. You know, and that's when I started to really look at, again, you know, all these other beliefs that I had when it came to believing in the Yahweh God and praying in tongues and all this other stuff that's in the Bible. I started to re-examine like the stuff that I read in the Bible, because I've read it like from cover to cover. I could quote it, you know. I was one of them people thumping the Bible like, you gonna believe, you know what I'm saying? And then when I was like, what's the good reasoning behind this? You know? And when I was like, and I remember like when I just completely let go of my belief, I was about to chant. And then while I was sitting, you know, in the posture to chant, that's when I realized that I was responsible for my own life. That there was nothing there, more than likely nothing there that I could really glean onto that says that they will pop up Cynthia just in case if she falls. If she falls, it's because she falls. She got to it's up to her to get herself back together. Gotcha. And I remember when I came to that realization, I cried. Because like it was because like to me it was like a death, you know. It was a grieving process, because like, you know, for so long I believed this stuff. I believe that God got me, you know. I believe cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you. And the more that I cast the cares, the less I saw him there, you know. And that's when I realized that more than likely that's because there was nothing there to cast your cares on, you know. And that's when, you know, I was like, okay, you know, that's when I was like, that's it, I'm atheist, you know. So like it took
did that also give you like a bit of empowerment in knowing that you're the master of your own ship?
I would definitely. It took a minute for me to get to that thought pattern, but I when I finally got there, it was very freeing, very empowering, it was almost like, you know, a lot of weights that I was carrying from being a theist, being a Christian, started to fall off. Because, and also too, one of the things that I had to even tell a friend of mine when we were talking about secular humanism, and I had to kind of tell her the difference between being a person that gleans to humanism versus like human nature, because like she was kind of getting them confused a bit. I was telling her that when you practice humanism, you know, basically you are an ethical person and you do good just because it's right to do, you know. I don't necessarily have to concern myself with, okay, if you do this or don't do this, you're going to go to hell, right? You don't necessarily have that. You don't have that whole like big brother sky daddy looking at you, judging everything that you do. And I find that very empowering, because like I'm free to just be who I am without having to answer to anybody for what I do or what I say, if that makes sense.
And something else, I understand what people are saying about the woo of Buddhism. Buddhism is my understanding, though. I mean, there's a spirituality and we have a friend named Jay from the Nevermore Tavern. He's a Buddhist, and he might be somebody to have on the show as well. But there's not really my understanding a God of any kind. But there is this. Depending, there's some woo. I remember being a young man, 12, 13 years old. I met this guy. We were living in Oklahoma, and he came through, and he was just some guy. I don't remember who he was. But I remember hearing that Nam Yoho Ringako thing. I remember hearing, and to him, it was like what he told me it was. Of course, I'm a young, impressionable kid. It's like words of power that, you can use this and do this, or, like if you're in a bad situation, it'll help you get out. I'd never heard that it was, and the fact that you echoed it back exactly like he said the words, I was like, wow, that's the same thing. But you say it has this whole different, but so there is this woo aspect. And it's good that you're not. You didn't even grace that. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, that's okay. No, you're right. As far as like, I've heard other practitioners of Nichiren Buddhism who chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo look at it very wooish. And but the more that you study it, the less wooish it becomes. I mean, even if you look at the founder of Buddhism himself, Siddhartha, he was, I know, like, depending on like what school of Buddhism that you like espouse to, they would, some of them would actually look at him as an actual deity, like this is a divine individual. And I have to tell them, no, he wasn't. He was just a really wise guy. He was a wise man, he just got it. You know what I'm saying? Like he sat, he meditated under the Bodhi tree. And then, after he emerged, he came up with the Eightfold Path, and I understand. And if there's any allusion to a deity or, anything that's like woo-wee, like it's metaphor. It's not something that we should glean onto, that there's actually these Buddha gods that's doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
So what it kind of reminds me of is when people condition a click word. So if you've conditioned your mind when you say a certain phrase to think a certain thing, it's just triggering that kind of mentality. So if you're stressed out and by uttering whatever it is that you're going to utter, if your mind has been conditioned to go to a calm state, you can see how that could work in that kind of way. It sounds very therapeutic in that kind of way. No matter how you're uttering it or whatever words you're saying, it just sounds like a conditioned response. And it sounds like a fantastic coping mechanism for people.
I definitely have used it because, like, I'm a person that's very anxious. I deal with anxiety, and especially when I'm on highways. So, and I have stopped, on the highway, just chanting, just to get my head all uncluttered. And it wasn't that, oh, the power of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo stopped it. No, it didn't. It just all it did was chanting helped clear me up so that I can keep driving. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like what Daniel said about like using it as like a coping mechanism, as a way to kind of help, bring stuff together for me in my head. I've heard like even you mentioned, Chris, about like the other person saying that they used it, to do all types of, fantastic things. And I don't discount people's experience. If that's their experience, that's whatever, cool. But at the same time, I don't particularly like using those particular phrasing or language when you are describing this, because it gives people a false impression that you can wave this particular, chanting stick and then all of your problems go away. And that's just not the truth. That's not the case. That's not life. And and I was like, but if you utilize it as far as like as a way to help cope with some things, to help kind of clear your head, even like kind of, help you to the point where you can make a proper decision because you're kind of all over the place. And that's what I mostly use it for. Like, I'm not chanting to win the lottery. If I win, great. If I don't, well, I don't even really play the lottery, so more than likely I'm gonna win. But
hard to win if you don't play.
Yeah, so so like that to me, like that's kind of silly to do. And
it's
I've heard
easy to lose. Sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah. And and I've heard like people like, I was chanting to win the lottery. I'm like, did you win yet? And they're like, well, no, but I'm like, okay.
It reminds me of when I was making fun of people who claim they're psychic. When I said, how many times have you won the lottery?
Right.
Right.
We have an interesting and unusual dynamic going on with the show, and I've never had this happen before. We've had controversial people on the show. I don't think we've been terribly controversial. Have we been controversial? Well, we talked a little bit of black stuff. We've talked a little bit of race and history, and we talked a little bit of Buddhism. We haven't been terribly. I don't think we've really been all that. Normally on my shows,
we have two psych majors at the same time.
No. Let me show you. Normally on my show, I get 18 to 25 likes. Every now and then, maybe if Math Pig shows up, he'll give me a thumbs down. Rarely do I get a thumbs down. Today, we have got 21 likes and 23 thumbs down. What the hell is going on? What have we done to stir that kind of thumbs down into my... I've never seen that. We have had Darth Dawkins come through my chat with rounds of these raging nutbag Christians. I mean, I'm not talking about just Christians. I'm talking about these guys are just not right. We've had them come through, and never have I seen something like that. I don't know who it is out there that I don't know what we've done. If something about race is bothering a group of people, you need to go the hell away. I appreciate that we got almost 40 people watching. That's great.
Well, it's funny now that you brought that up. I'm seeing the amount of likes jumping.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I'm just saying I've never had that happen. I don't know if that's like somebody with multiple accounts got all mad and did a thing. Wow. I'm just saying I have never seen that. Is that part of the Buddha argument that happened earlier? Somebody came and got all ticked off and started signing to a whole bunch of accounts and giving me thumbs. I don't know. It's just never happened before. We get Cynthia on our show and she just trashes everything. And
that's what I do. I just burn shit down. That's what I do.
Plug Chris alike. I mean, come on, people.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
Get that YouTube algorithm going.
I tell you. Well, according to MathPig, and that was one of the things about a friend of mine who he's busy, doesn't come by the show anymore. I think it's because I changed the time and he's working now. But anyway, he used to give me a thumbs down, and he would say, it really doesn't matter. It kind of just shakes up the algorithm, and it's good for you either way. That's the same thing I tell were you here with me the other day? No, you weren't here with me. The last time Darth Dawkins people came in my chat and they started, hey, are you going to debate Dawkins? I'm like, you guys are great. You're just giving me all kinds of traffic. It's wonderful. So, but I've never had something like that. I wonder if it was the race. If it is the race thing, whoever it is, I'm ashamed of you. Just go the hell away. If you're downing us for being pro race or anti-racism, just go away. I don't need your traffic. So I just wanted to say that I've never seen that dynamic before. Thank you, Cynthia. Cynthia, that's twice I've called you Cynthia. I have created a name for you.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's a few. I got a few of them. Like my best friend calls me Cynthia. I don't know where she got that from. Had another friend, because like we used to do music a lot together, so he used to call me Sister Synthesizer. All types of this all types of things. For a while there, I think that it's like somebody would see like my name like in print, they would like automatically like compose it to Christina. And I was like, I don't know how you got Christina from Cynthia, but okay, I don't know. And I even told people like, listen, I would turn around if you say, hey, you. If I know you pointing at me like, hey, you, like, yeah.
Right, exactly. I've got another question for you. We're past the hour. If you guys need to go, let me know. But I got a couple of more questions that I'll just keep asking you until you tell me you're tired of asking questions. Okay, this is something we kind of got with Daniel in the beginning because he's in Washington, just outside of Seattle, and we heard there was some craziness, which still blows my mind. As soon as we get off this show, I got to remember to go check the news because I hadn't heard anything like that. I'm so busy running the show. I got up this morning and I was building the scenes. I didn't look at the news. I didn't know that, for those of you who don't know, Mr. Daniel Bennet, sorry, Daniel, said this morning that last night somebody in Seattle drove into a crowd, then got out of their truck and shot somebody. They drove into a protesting crowd, got out of their truck and shot somebody. So
it wasn't a truck, it was a car, but still.
Car vehicle. Yes, I just assumed it was a truck, right? With like dog balls on the back of it or something. For those of you from the South who know what dog balls are on a truck, anyway, it's complicated. Right. Anyway, Cynthia, what's going on in your world? You're in Chicago, right? Outside of Chicago?
Yes.
So what's going on there? Oh, you are in Chicago. Okay.
I am in Chicago. I'm Chicago proper. Yes. And never tell a person from Chicago, say, oh, I'm familiar with the suburb of Chicago and think it's the same thing. No, it is not. And people who are in Chicago will get a serious attitude with you. So, yeah. But I'm in Chicago, in the city. I'm Chicagoan.
Got you. Yeah. So what's going on there? They still got the riots going on? Is it really just on the weekends? Do they calm out during the week? What's happening?
So I know that the last weekend was like the biggest weekend for protesting, rioting, and looting. They did they were like in a downtown area, and then once the downtown area got closed off, then they kind of switched to a lot of places on the south side, and I believe on the west side too. I was even good thing is like myself and my family, we were kind of homed up at home. Even though like I was really having like straight first world problems because my Whole Foods and my Instacart completely got canceled. So I was like, yes, at the same time, I was like, what the hell, man? And, and I was just like, I'm having first world problems right now, but
yeah, we have them.
Yeah, we do. We have them. But, so like, but it wasn't until like I kind of got a chance to like leave, and I was like driving around and I saw like all these boarded up businesses and buildings and stuff like that because of like all the damage, and I was like, oh my goodness, I could not believe what I'm seeing. And it was really, and I was having mixed feelings about it, to be honest with you, because as much as like I consider myself, or I try to be a person of peace, I'm also a person that understands civil unrest, and you can't necessarily continuously do business as usual when it comes to, systemic racism, institutional racism in all these different places and expect people just to take it. I remember watching an old interview with Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a civil rights activist back in the 50s and 60s. And she said something really profound. She said that I can see why these young people are tearing things up. I'm paraphrasing. And she's saying that they're going to tear it up because they're going to say that, if we can't have it, you can't either.
Right. And someone else put it quite eloquently is the country didn't start taking anybody seriously or didn't even notice until the building started burning.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, like I said, you tear down the infrastructure. That's when, people, start taking different things seriously. And I mean, and that is the unrest of your constituency because of, policies that are being allowed to continuously show its ugly head and affecting communities adversely, and they're not going to take it anymore. So, and as much as like I was like, damn, my Instacart got canceled, that sucks. I'm not pushing back against this to the point where I'm like, oh, this is so horrible that this happened. I mean, because like, even if you think about like the civil rights movement, it wasn't until demonstrations and even some parts of rioting that happened until you actually got legislation. And part of this is kind of like, I would just say societal practice to say that we ain't gonna take it no more. So
MLK put it quite eloquently, right? His language of the oppressed, I believe, is what he said. I think it was. I don't hope I'm not misquoting him. I seem to remember him saying something along those lines. Granted, he also elaborated into much other stuff, but it was just one of those kinds of things that you notice that in the United States we have this bad habit of just we ignore all the peaceful protesting, but as it's almost like you have to throw something across the room to gather, to get their attention versus, yelling at them. It's like, hey, over here.
But when does change come? And this is what I kind of went on about my rant the other day. I love the riots. Well, I can't say I love the riots. That's not what I mean. I mean I love the people getting out in the streets and supporting the things that they need. But we march over here, we march over here, we march over here. Nothing changes. Didn't we march? Didn't we march for the death of a black man a couple years ago? Right? I mean, and then we march for the death of this person. We march for this and this and this, and we march over here and we march over here, and it's great. It's great that we get out and do it. I absolutely support that. But then nothing changes. It's not until we decide, whenever we come out of this, when all the marches stop, and then we find out that new laws have been put across the country, and any police officer who's got, 2 or 3 strikes is out. If he's got a bad record, is out. If we go through their social media, and if they're doing hate web pages and they're doing hate groups on social media, they're out. We need to do that now, not after they kill somebody. And now, right now, all we're going to do is march and march and march. And we're going to wave our hands over here, march over here, and wave our hands over here. But until something actually changes, I'm not going to be satisfied.
If I may jump in,
please.
Back before I decided to go to college, and right after I got out of the military, I was actually looking into joining law enforcement, just because a lot of military people do. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was doing the whole interview with Tacoma PD, I had all the paperwork filled out. All I had to do was just show up that one day for the physical fitness test, which would have been pretty easy comparatively. And the thing that held me back was something that one of the cops said. They cracked a racist joke there in front of everybody, mm-hmm. and all the other people were laughing, and I was mortified. Mm. I was like, this man is a cop, a high-ranking cop, and you just cracked what you think is funny, a racist joke that disparaged black people, and right in front of all these people, you think that's funny. Mm. And at that point, I said, nope, I can't be a part of this. I was shocked that at that level of, the person who's in charge of recruiting new people is there. It's almost like they do that on purpose to see, like, all right, who will leave and who will stay. Mm. Like, wow.
Yeah.
That was shocking to hear that.
Absolutely. Hey, Cynthia, I was laughing. Junk Shop was actually talking to me. Oh, okay. He just didn't realize we had the same initials, CM, Chris Mallard. Yeah.
I was like, no, that's why I was like, no, I understand the rights. Don't quite love them, but, I understand them.
I understand them. Yes, gotcha. Well, something we talked about earlier, we mentioned affirmative action, and there's things like that, affirmative action is something that I remember going back a ways. I remember being down in Texas in the oil field and hearing people get their dander up and be angry because affirmative action was this and but I didn't really know what was going on. There's reasons why we have those programs. There's reasons why we have the Equal Housing Act and the affirmative action and all these other things. It's not because we're good people. Right. It's not because we go around treating equal people on the regular. No, it's because we treat people like shit given the opportunity. If they're mad because they're being forced to hire people of color, well, maybe, there's a need, there's an understanding, there's a reason. And that's because it's not because there's a difference between, hey, you know what? I just happen to wake up one day and I have these employees and they all happen to be white. I didn't think about it. It's just that's the popular in my neighborhood, and all that stuff is just kind of the thing. That's one thing. But when you sit there and a person of color comes in your place and you go, you know what? I'll thank you for this application. I'll let you know if we start hiring. And then you drop that in the garbage just because they're black.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that. And Christina, I know, will know exactly what I'm talking about. There are studies about
Daniel just did it. Then he just called me Christina. See, I told you. See, I put that in your
head. Cynthia, got it. No, that was but Cynthia will know exactly what I'm talking about. They've done studies where they will take someone. They'll take equal resumes, and they will just put an African American sounding name at the top of one page, and then what sounds like a white person's name on the other, and they will look, and these people, these are like identical, in education, experience, etc. And they will know there is a correlation with the white person getting the favoritism and the black person not even getting or the black sounding person's name not even getting a callback.
Yeah, I think it was a couple of studies that was done with that. I want to say one of them was wasn't the University of Michigan, and I think it was another one that was out of Stanford. I want to say.
I think that was Stanford that did that one.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I have to double check, but yeah, that so matter of fact, it was kind of funny. Like I had a friend of mine who was she said, I hate my job, I want to change it.
And who keeps disliking this video? I mean, I'm seeing those dislikes jumping.
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, like,
I guess we're being controversial as heck.
I guess so.
Listen, anytime that you talk about issues like this, it's controversial. Like when you talk about
truth hurts.
Truth hurts, and cognitive dissonance is real. You know,
that's right. That's true.
And so, like, and anytime that you actually like shine the light on stuff like this, you know, people are like, oh no, that's not it. No. You know what I'm saying? But even back to your point, when I was telling her, like, okay, well, if maybe you need to change your name on your resume, because she has more of like a more ethnic sounding name. And so I said, well, and I asked her, I said, what's your middle name? You know, and then she's like, well, it's I forgot what she said her middle name was. I said, well, maybe you need to just go your first initial, your middle name, and your last name in order for you. And I mean, and it's real messed up that Black Americans have to do stuff like that in order for them to be able to be considered like into hiring practices. You know, I mean, I'm pretty lucky. I have a very Anglo-Saxon sounding name, you know. And my mom said there was no way that I was going to make up a name for you. That was not going to happen. You know, even though like around when I was born, that was a very trendy thing to do. And a lot of it had to go back to that whole identity type thing. But she's like, but I was not going to do that. And also we had a name, and even like the name that I had before, the name that I got now, that was also very Anglo-Saxon name. So matter of fact, I even had like a few people tell me that they didn't know I was Black until they actually met me in person.
My ex-girlfriend was like that. She had a very Anglo-Saxon name, and she was ethnically Chinese, and she would get, and she was also, since she was adopted at a very young age, you know, baby. She has a Joyzy kind of accent. It was kind of funny listening to her. She has a very Joyzy, you know, and when I say funny, I mean that because I'm on the West Coast. So she got over here somehow, if I remember right, without going into too much of her life. But I remember when she would talk to people on the phone with this Jersey accent and everything, for some reason people were always surprised when they see her in person, like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. It's like, well, what were you expecting? The goddamn Pope?
It kind of looks like, I think I got the impression that the dislikes have nothing to do with the racism. It's something to do with the modders. So I guess we have somebody who has skill in that kind of department, and our modders made that person mad, and now that person is, I guess, trolling. I'm learning here. I'm trying to run a show, so I don't really know. But what I do want to say is, to the person giving me the likes, if you're giving me the likes because the mods are giving you grief, or you had a bump in with the mods, okay, I understand. I'm grateful you're not doing it out of racism or your dislike for our topic. Thank you. Carry on with your dislikes. That's fine. I understand. Science Talk TV was the one who actually, Chris from Science Talk TV earlier, he asked a question way before the show even went on, and I weed-brained it and forgot. But now you're still here. So I have this question for you. There is talk, and I think this really for everybody. So if you've got an opinion on it, throw it in the chat for me, because this is going to be a tricky one, I think. So what are your thoughts on the current talk and again, right, my head has been down. I haven't been paying attention to the news. I'm just hearing this from the chat about the talk of defunding the police in Minneapolis or Minnesota, or where specifically where at, I'm not sure.
Well, it's not just Minneapolis. New York is doing it as well, and a lot of other places are doing it. And defunding doesn't mean they're just taking the money and getting rid of it. It means they're investing into other programs
Right.
Like social programs.
Right.
Sorry,
Well,
Cynthia, I didn't mean to take it away from you, but
No, it's cool. I think that I've heard talk like that previously, and defunding the police. Well, one of the things that I've seen a lot when we look at the crime bill back in 1994, you saw like a lot of money going into police departments, hiring more police, and also giving states more money to build prisons. And I would definitely call more so for a reshifting of resources when it comes to law and law enforcement, and putting it back into the resources of the community. I mean, one of the things that, my group advocates for, and this is what we talk about right here, reparations for the American descendants of slavery, which is about paying the debt that the descendants of American slaves did not receive when they were free back in 1865. And if you really think about a community that's stable, so these are mostly working individuals. They have like a higher class of schools. They have a higher rate of home ownership. They have basically everything that you need in that particular neighborhood to be a functioning neighborhood. They have less presence of law enforcement as far as but compared to a community that has none of that or very little of that, they have a higher presence of when it comes to law enforcement.
Yeah. But they also, you look at that, and they also, who has more social funding, it's flip-flopped.
Well, something else I kind of feel like I might need to toss in there. I don't really see the terms defunding of the police department necessarily to mean that they're trying to get rid of the police department. If the policemen had, just like maybe, obviously they needed a protection, a bulletproof vest, blue shirt, belt, gun, pants, some shoes, perhaps, a modest vehicle, like they used to drive modest vehicles that were painted like bright, and so you can see them, and then defund the military style equipment, the helmets, the big huge trucks. That's the kind of defunding the police I could get behind, to where we restore them to be servants of the people.
That should be funded with the police. It should be getting them properly educated in social services and whatnot, so they're not these
and properly vetting them,
and also hiring more of them that looks like the community that they're policing.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I can even think of my my neighborhood. It's a predominantly Black neighborhood, and then on the there's a viaduct area, and then on the other side it's a predominantly Mexican area, right? But I can't, majority of times, if I'm driving around our neighborhood, the majority of police I see is white, and so I remember this, one night I got stopped by a police officer because my headlight was out, right? And I was on my way to AutoZone the very next day to get it fixed. and so when he stopped me, all I could, my heart was racing because it was an unmarked car, and my heart was racing. My hands got 10 and 2. Yeah, I was so scared, and and I'm thinking okay, I did pay my car note, right? Yeah, I did. Okay, my insurance was in my glove compartment, right? Yeah. And I'm thinking all the different things that I can make sure that I can do to make sure I come home alive. This is how I'm thinking.
Right. And you shouldn't have to, by the way.
And I mean, and that was the next part that I was thinking, I'm thinking all the stuff that I can do to make sure that I stay alive, but why do I have to think about all the things I need to do to stay alive? You know what I'm saying? And I mean, luckily the cop wasn't a dick. He was just telling me, hey, just want to let you know about your light out. Just you can go to AutoZone. I mean, and he came and I think that he came kind of disarming, because I think that he could probably feel my anxiety when he was walking up, and he knew who it was, of course, because he ran my license plate and saw that was my car. But even I think that it would have been less of an encounter as far as like my anxiousness was concerned, if like the guy looked like me, you know what I'm saying? Because like more than likely, if you look like me, more than likely you will probably have like the experience of me, you know, because like I mentioned before, like when you think of like people of color versus like actually naming the ethnicity that you're dealing with at that particular time, we're going to have different experiences depending on the communities that we actually belong to. And so and with all the with the retraining and all that, those are all really great things, but you know, we really need to deal with these institutions. Like we have to deal with the institutions that actually brought us to this particular place first. You know, racism doesn't come from just anywhere. I mean, the whole premise of racism comes from policy, you know. And even though, like, I think Dr. King said it best, he said, well, you can't legislate morals, but you can regulate behavior. And the only way that you can really regulate behavior is through policy. You know, it was policy that, you know, stopped a lot of things from happening to give more access to African Americans in the community. But there's also still very much so policy that will stop and put boundaries on access, you know, that never have been addressed. And I know that I would look more so at budgets of police officers, policing, as far as like, where is this money going? Right. I would also look at their unions, because oftentimes I was listening to John Oliver earlier, and he was specifically talking about, you know, how a lot of these unions have like contracts that basically protect the bad apples inside these police force. It's kind of like, for some of the stuff that he was mentioning, it reminded me on how Catholic priests were shifted from one diocese to another when they were accused of adverse behavior for children, you know. Yeah, I mean, and so like when you like look at like all these particular protections that happen, you know, for people who have multiple complaints, and also not investing in the community that's around them, so that they won't have to be in such of a big presence. And I mean, it's a lot of stuff that definitely needs to be tore down. But you know, my bigger fandom as far as like how to, you know, kind of kill institutional racism is to make the group whole that has been adversely affected by institutional racism in the first place. Right. You know, if our communities are whole, then the less bullshit that you will see in our communities. You know, if the business owners in our communities actually are us, you know, if we are allowed to be able to run them as we see fit, and how and even how we police our communities as we see fit, and we have the seat at the table. You know, a lot of this stuff that we're constantly seeing perpetuated over and over again would cease. Yeah, and that's why I vote for reparations. All right.
Well, you know, there's something that the Blazing Wizard Pope here says in the chat. Let me just pop this through. Just because we don't hear about it in the news does not mean it does not happen. Muslims are discriminated against in India. Don't get me started on Kashmir. Buddhists in China. You know, we can stop for a moment, because the reason why this came up is because the comment was made that it seems like only in America you fear for your life at a traffic stop for your headlight. And somebody made that comment, and I made the comment, well, yeah, only in America and in 1938 Nazi Hitler, where you actually literally feared for your life on the matter of a traffic stop. And so the point that I believe the Blazing Wizard Pope is making is that, yes, it's bad in the United States, but it's not only in the United States. It's everywhere. We've got racism against brown people. You know, have you ever heard? I remember the first time I've heard a Hispanic person talk racistly against a black person, and I was kind of blown away, going, "Wait! Ain't you all on the same side against us? But no, there are battle lines that are drawn in racism that have nothing to do with me. Nothing."
Yeah,
you know?
no, there, as far as like that is concerned, and well, one of the things that uh when it comes to like, Hispanic groups and Black groups, I know that like you oftentimes hear like Black and brown. One, brown is not a race, and you that's one. Brown is not a race.
Okay.
Black is a race, but brown is not. Matter of fact, if you look at any type of demographic sheet, and I have to do that often because, of course, like I sign up people for medication support all the time. I have to get demographic information, and so you have like a list of races first. Brown is not one of them. And then under that, you have ethnicity. And then and it would be either Hispanic or not Hispanic.
I understand.
And oftentimes, and I don't know if you look at the census data, in actuality, less than 3% of Hispanic people actually choose the race of Black. Like the majority of them choose white, and so there is, and even if you look at when it comes to income levels and wealth levels, actually Hispanics are, as a group, I'm not saying like individually, but as a group, they're actually doing better than African Americans.
Yeah.
And so, and matter of fact, I even was listening to NPR, shout out to NPR. I love that, I was listening to a story that they were doing here in Chicago about how there were actual Latin gangs, like Latinx gangs that were activated to protect businesses in predominantly Hispanic neighborhoods. And at first it was just, let's protect the businesses from looters. And then I got escalated to, let's just start with police targeting protesters that were Black and beating them up and killing them too. Right. And it wasn't all of them. I'm not going to say it was, because the person that they were interviewing about it, who said that he ended up having to stop a few of his compatriots from engaging in this behavior where, they were targeting Black people who were involved with the protests, who they just said, well, we're just going to get you just because you're Black. And so automatically we know that you're going to mess up the business. Right.
Right.
So, and we do happen to see those particular tropes perpetuated even in that community. I mean, even though I have Hispanic friends, and I got friends of every ethnicity. I do. But like one of the things that I think that a lot of people, and this is probably also attributed to the dislikes, is that, you got to address the elephants in the room. And it's not to slight anybody else, but you have to say that, no, as a group, this is what happens, and this is what the other group absorbs because of it. And we also, and I mean, and let's just keep it real. There are all types of stereotypes that's actually attached to being African American. We know that, what I'm saying? And I mean, and if we all give ourselves a good 5 minutes, we can name at least about 50. Right. But, and these are also, and because we know the stereotypes that are attached to being African American, these are also attitudes that, that other groups will pick up about us, because this is stuff that's constantly being said about us, Black men being thugs, Black women being hyperly sexualized, they're not educated. They don't care about their communities. They're lazy. I mean, all types of bullshit, you know what I'm saying? Right. And then, of course, if you are not necessarily part of that group, and that's constantly what you hear, and even if you don't know a lot of Black folk who may not necessarily have this particular trope that's attached to them, that's what you believe, you know what I'm saying? So, and that's definitely going to color your interactions with a group of people when you see them on the street. Black, there's a whole bunch of Black people over there, Black men over there. So, they're going to be thuggish. So we got to treat them accordingly. And that happens, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite a lot, I'm sure. Yeah. And we've got other people. There is no shortage of examples of racism throughout the world. And people are in the chat are throwing out some of those. One of the things that Cindy Plaza said that really kind of...
Oh, shout out to Cindy Plaza. That's my girl. I love her.
Cindy, that's right. She said here, on John Oliver's show, a woman said that. And you know what? This one rings with me. Because if this was, let me say it first. And they are lucky. I think they're talking about us. Let me put me up here big. And they are lucky, people who look like me, that what black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, same thing with atheists against religion, Christians. Christians have done so much against us. Someday we're going to be the populace, and man, they better be glad we want equality, not revenge. Same thing with black people. If they ever wanted, because I haven't done anything. I'm very supportive. I'm not guilty of any of those sins, and I don't believe anybody in this group. Not that my dad obviously was not that way either, but nobody in this group that I know of faults the person for the sins of the father or the grandfather or the great grandfather, right? I mean, you wouldn't hold me to that. I haven't done anything, but there's so many out there who do, who can't. I wake up one day and I'm like, you know what? Racism isn't an issue in our country because I'm oblivious to it. And then, holy shit, look at this over here and look at this over here and look at this over here. Pop me out of my little white group that I lived in West Texas, where it's mostly whites and some Hispanics, and they were the most popular, so they didn't really suffer from racism. You know, they got the jobs because, you know, anyway. But it is.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic.
There.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't go away.
And the thing about, like, I remember listening to that young lady who said that she said, you know, you're lucky that black people are not necessarily looking for equality, not revenge. And you know, and I say this often, you may even have, and I may have, like, you know, like a couple of black people that kind of, like, you know, push back to what I say, but you know, enslaved people were granted citizenship under the law in 1866 through the 14th Amendment. And if you read the first section of the 14th Amendment, you're going to see that there's certain rights and protections that were granted to this particular people for being citizens. However, what happens is, and that we constantly are seeing over and over again, is that these particular rights under the 14th Amendment are constantly being eroded, you know? So what we are wanting is our equal protection under the law. We are wanting equal access under the law. We are wanting we're wanting our citizenship. We want a full access to citizenship. And when you're doing things like redlining, when you're doing things like, you know, holding particular credit institutions at bay so that we can't build businesses. Even when we built townships where when we were the business owners, when we were the home owners, when we were
Black
all
Wall
these
Street.
different things. But yeah, Tulsa, Oklahoma, you burned it down. Greenwood, you burned it down. Rosewood, you burned it down. I mean, like, we have so many different instances and events in history where, you know, we had, like, you know, these particular places like burned down. Like I think of, like, this one story I read about a farmer whose family purchased their property. They purchased like about 200 and something acres in the South, about roughly like 10, 12 years after slavery was abolished. And in the 40s, there was a dispute on the boundary of the property with their white neighbor. So they called a surveyor to come and say, where is the boundary line, right? And so that they got it. They had court documents say, this is where our property stops and this is where your property begins. So everything should be cool, right? No. What ended up happening is that the white neighbors got together with the police officers in that area, beat up the homeowner, and then drove him back to his home with his family looking at him all bloody and bruised and said, you have a matter of hours to get your things and leave. And they completely took the entire property from this family who owned this property since the 1870s, you know, and there was no recourse for them to go through in order for them to get their property back. And we see these instances that happen in history over and over again. So, like, you know, so it's no wonder that, you know, Black Americans that descend from chattel slavery own less as about 2.6% of the wealth of the nation. There's no question about home ownership being down and unemployment being high. I mean, all the different things that you can think that actually makes a person like a viable member of society. You know, that was something that was never granted. You know what I'm saying? So, and we deal with that now.
But you know what? We can't afford reparations. We can't afford health care. We can't afford.
Oh my goodness!
Right, and then we get this little plague coming on. This little
prisons. You can afford.
Look. Let me tell you something.
Hold on. We get this little plague coming through that suddenly threatens the big businesses, and suddenly they're dumping $6 trillion into the economy. Where was that money?
Right.
We couldn't use just a hunk of that money for reparations. I'm not talking about giving them a whole country away. I'm talking about just being respectful, just fixing, educating our own people, healthcare for our own people. That money was there the whole time, those cocksuckers, and yet they let us suffer until they start suffering up in arms. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine, because I said the same. I said something very similar previously, like when somebody was pushing back against me about reparations. I said, look, first off, can we not ignore how the country came off on $2.2 trillion in less than a week?
Yep.
Can we mention? And the majority of that money went to corporations. Okay, that's one. And also too, like, and if any person really wants to get like an idea of exactly what reparations look like for the American descendants of slavery, please go to, and I'll put it in the chat too, abos101.com and see what it looks like. And it's not just like giving away money. It's set asides. It's programs. It's rebuilding of resources and institutions. It's infrastructure. It's multi-generational. It's not something that's just going to be just a one-off. You take a check and then go off in the actual ether. No, it's going to be a holistic legislation that is going to affect a group of people to make them whole. And also too, reparations is a debt. Let us not forget that the United States was built on slavery. Like, cotton was king. That's why they called it King Cotton. And it was our gross national product for a very long time. That is what caused the United States to become an economic superpower off of free labor. Okay.
So it's not just the United States. There's a lot of private companies that are still in existence today.
Yes.
That made their money off of slavery. That are big, major companies that have not paid damn squat back in the communities that they enslaved in the first place.
That's right. Aetna was one.
If we can, just for a moment,
all those. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to say, we are perfect. I don't know what the hell just happened. There's a noise. We are. Did y'all hear that? Well, all right, so we're vilifying the United States for the thing we did with slavery. That's great. This land, you said, was built on slavery. We got to say, though, on top of the dead Indians that we murdered so we could build the country on. So, don't the Indians deserve some sort of reparations as well? Wouldn't they, Native Americans?
Well, actually, Native Americans get money from the government. They
kind of do. They actually kind of do, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They get money from the government. So, like, government has. And now I'm not saying it's enough. It's not. For what happened to the Native Americans.
Of course.
I mean. But
I just wanted to throw them on the pile too, is all. I just wanted to get their names out there.
Come on.
That's very Elizabeth Warren, but that's okay now. But no, like I would definitely say, but they do actually get money from the government for a lot of the violations that have happened to their group. But what I'm even saying is that we don't even get that. You know what I'm saying? Like, Black Americans have not, and everybody say, oh, don't you have affirmative action? You got welfare, and I'm like, yo, look. Do you know that there's more white folk on welfare than Black folk? You know what I'm saying? So no, that is not reparations.
That's not at all. And even with that kind of thing, they expect you to go out and try to get off of that. If you're on welfare, it's not like welfare is a gimme. You have to supposed to be getting off of that, right? I mean, so to claim that's your reparations is just shit.
Yeah, I remember one guy told me that. I was just like, where are you? Why are you not in front of me so I can punch you in your face? No, I'm not a violent person. I so am not, on occasion. Depends on how much wine I have. I'm just kidding. But
words can sting.
Yes, they can. And, and they mean something,
Yes.
so, so like, so that's when you have to tell people, like, no, that is not the case. And matter of fact, I don't know any person that was on welfare, any type of social service program, and got rich off of that. I know that we had the instances of Jenny Jones and Ricky Lake back in the day where you had these welfare, and to be honest with you, I think them people was paid, to be honest with you, for coming on and showing their asses on, like, I'm on welfare and I'm wearing leather and all this other stuff. Like, nah, child, please, let's keep it real. You're not becoming a person of means and wealth if you are constantly on the system. You're not, and so and it was like and that is a program that is designed to help be like the filter for when you are in between, saying, like, you're in between jobs, you're in between it's just like all the different things that you basically need so that you don't falter. That's what it's designed for. It's not designed for something that's going to be a long-term solution. Right. So, of course.
And it's certainly not equal to reparations or anything.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's a debt. I mean, reparations at bottom line is a debt.
It's just I think part of the problem is it's complicated, but again, it's kind of got to lead. The complication is we can't afford it because we've got to pay these and that's what it was 4 months ago. And then suddenly we discovered that they had trillions of dollars just kicking it, that they could have done at any time. I'm not necessarily saying every black person needs to have a mansion just because they're black. No. I'm not saying that. Nobody is saying that. We're just talking about, look at some of the slums that these people live in because of us and our actions. There's things that can be done. There's a lot of things. It's just a complicated subject that we don't have enough traction on, that we need to get some traction on. And to say that we don't have money is a bunch of shit. I'm just saying we just kind of need to roll up to the Congress with a little guillotine and fix this solution.
Look, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. I know that, like, especially since this whole thing kind of broke out, and I had like a few white folk reach out to me, like, Cynthia, what can we do? And I said, well, what you can do as a constituent, as a citizen of the United States, is write your congressman and tell them that you support reparations for the American descendants of slavery. Support it. Like, as far as like I of course I studied the subject, so I have a better idea of like what it would look like. But we have experts already that are here that knows exactly how this is something that can be done in an amicable way. We have economists, all that. Yeah.
For those who are uninformed, can you explain to those people what those reparations would be used for?
Well, that's why I was mentioning, like, a good place to kind of start to see what reparations can look like is ADOS101.com. Matter of fact, let me just pull it up real quick, and then I can
post it. I'll post it in the link if you want. I'll post a link to other people if you want to go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Of course, that's one of the things I feel about the reparations is it's not a one-off. It's not there's not one solution. It's a complicated thing that needs to be. Unfortunately, there's a whole group of people who don't want to think about it at all.
Yeah, no, it's definitely that's why I say it's a multifaceted piece of legislation that would happen that would be in the form of a lot of different areas. Like the crux of it, yes, is cash payments, but also too, like when I talk about set asides, a good book that kind of looks like what that would be is Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here? From Chaos to Community, where he talked about different, government initiatives that can be done in that particular atmosphere to make sure that, certain things are going to be done in these particular communities where, like, descendants of slavery actually live, so that they can actually have access to a holistic life. Let me see. I'm trying to see something. I'm trying to get to like
on your page.
He's saying, yeah, I was like, okay, so like one of the things when it talks about how do we implement it on this page, it said reparations can be paid for by the U.S. government through taxation or borrowing. Using modern monetary theory, you could first fund reparations, and the subsequent tax revenue generated by spending would pay for the cost. America could also fund reparations by proceeding to hold jointly liable involved African nations that traded slaves in shores and mass, and Great Britain, who actually had control of America from 1619 to 1776, and what was among the main beneficiaries of cotton produced after the American independence. And it should come into the form of cash payments to African Americans, as well as large scale initiatives targeted at the specific group, American descendants of slavery. The policy items could include, but not limited to, a debt-free college, home ownership assistance, business financial support, fully endowing all historically Black colleges, and incentivizing those schools to admit descendants of American slavery, guarantee government contracts for Black businesses, and free medical care. So, this is a multifaceted type, initiative that could happen as far as to make sure that these, our group is made whole.
Yeah, it's complicated. I don't know how it's all going to work. But again, I want to say we ain't got money for all that. But wait a second.
But
here's the deal. Here's the deal, though. What the thing is this is what I'm afraid happened. We got this $6 trillion, and yes, it was dumped into our economy. But really, that $6 trillion, let me put it up here so I can complain all big. The $6 trillion, some of it went to us. A little bit. We got our tiny little checks. Right? The checks, in case you don't know, that $1,200 is what they figured a person on minimum wage, 40 hours a week, lives on in a month. In case you're wondering where they got that number from. So we got that. The rest of that money went to the big businesses, big, huge. I mean, almost all of it went right back into the laps of the rich. This is the bilking of our nation. They saw this plague as another way to just open the spout from the American economy and just dump the coin into the pockets of those with nesting yachts. You know what I'm saying? That's who's benefiting from this. And you know what? Wait, I got a question. These big, huge businesses. Oh no. Our employees can't make it to work. We have to pay them even though they're not working for a month or two or something. We can't do it. Oh my gosh, we can't do it. What about all those billions in profit that you've been holding on to? You can't go a month and pay. Yeah, you can't go and pay your people a month or two or three without going under? Really? After all these years of all those billions, why are we letting you keep all those taxes if that's all this? Oh, sure. The first sign of problems, you come to us begging for more tax money instead of using, if you was to just crack open the tax, tax shelter place down in Bahamas or whatever. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, right? Crack open those kind of places. There's plenty of money. There's absolutely plenty of money. We're just right now getting bilked. I know they say it's for us. All this trillions of dollars. We're not getting it. We're not going to get it. Yes, it's an interesting view of your gut. Hello? Did we lose?
No, Daniel was fixing something.
I see.
I think.
Well, I'm going to do that until he figures it out.
Yeah.
Moobs are us. Lost you, Daniel. I think we actually lost him altogether.
Oh no.
Anyway, yeah, he's hung up now. You know what? This is a good time. We've been going for we just hit the 2 hour mark. I can't believe you talked me to death, lady.
I know.
That is great. I'm going to add him back to the stream. Hello, Daniel Chest.
Sorry about that. Yeah, my phone decided to go log into the damn Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi doesn't like to keep up sometimes.
I see. Well, you're there. Well, I was fixing to wrap it up. We've been going a couple of hours. Cynthia, I'm going to ask you to come back on the show. We got to have you back. You're wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I would love to be back.
So I will hit you up and talk schedules with you, and really, I really will. I'll see if I've got questions for you as well about other stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm going to let everybody else go. If you got just a minute, I'll ask you to hold on for just a second, and then we'll visit with you after I shut the stream off. Daniel, I'm going to say bye to Daniel. Thank you very much for co-hosting with me this morning, Daniel. You were wonderful again.
You always give me the best hosts. I mean guests. It's always a pleasure.
The wonderful, huh? Wonderful guest. I love this guest. And thank you to everybody in the chat, all your super chats. We really appreciate it. The coffee, the love, the questions. You guys are wonderful. We had like 40 people. Button. Yeah. Hit the like button. It's moot today. Anyway. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're not a subscriber to me, subscribe to me. I'm going to put links to Daniel. I screwed up and didn't get the other links. And I'm going to put one more time. I'm going to put a link to your blog here, Miss Cynthia. In our chat. No, that's not it. I'll put another link to our blog, maybe. And then anybody, please feel free to go by and watch her blog and check her out. She has got some amazing stuff, and we'll have her back on the show. So I guess that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you guys for watching.
And I've got new end credits for those who are, it's the first time I've done new end credits. So here we go.